Hello everyone, welcome to the CG Cookie live stream. This is the third episode in the series of creating this tropical, simplified Eevee environment, very stylized Eevee environment. And today should be a fun day because we've been focusing on individual assets, which can be fun, but two streams of doing that. I think we're all ready to get on with the show, start building the actual what I'm calling the assembly file, where we put all these individual pieces together into the final scene. So that's what we're going to be going there pretty quickly. However, last week I stopped with the rock. If you remember, I created this second version that had a better dirty vertex calculation, and I left the stream kind of hung up on what was the problem again? I think it was, should I leave it at the high resolution and just let Blender deal with the extra geometry, or should I UV unwrap the simplified rock and just like bake that texture? So I'm going to do it, I think, the most proper way real quick. It doesn't take that long, but I am going to unwrap this and then bake the detail from this one. So actually, I'm going to start over because I want to unwrap this first and then duplicate it, so we can get rid of this. And so yeah, sorry, someone asked that I didn't get right into it, Shin Wallace, but I kind of did. I try not to waste too much time getting into these streams. Sometimes I've seen feedback that's like, get on with it. So that I've trained myself to more do that, but you won't miss much. This is just a kind of cleaning up what I didn't finish last week. So with this rock, I'm going to unwrap this. If I think at the end of the last stream, I did select these edges that kind of have the rock, and so when I set that as a seam, Control E, mark seam, and then if we switch to the UV editing workspace, select everything you unwrap, that will create. That will just split our rock in half into two UV islands, and that's going to be plenty for what we want to do. And then I want to just rotate these around and position them to make a little better use of the space that we have. Blender's packing algorithm is not the best. It does well enough, but there is some left to be desired for optimizing the texel density. But all right, so we've got a simple unwrap. Now that I have unwrapped that, I'm going to duplicate the rock with Shift-D. Oh yeah, I need to enable screencast keys. Make sure you can see that. Okay. Maybe move it off to the right so that it doesn't interfere with this. And now that I have duplicated that, remember that the dirty vertex, if I switch to vertex paint, that's what the dirty vertex gives us. And it's kind of low on the detail spectrum. However, when I duplicate it and then apply our subsurf modifier and then go to vertex paint, Shift K to set all vertices to white, and then paint dirty vertex colors again, we get a much more detailed version of the vertex colors. So it's highlighting the edges very nicely. It's darkening the crevices. So this is just a much better, more informed dirty vertex color. So I want to bake this to a texture, and since it maintains the UVs from the previous version, all I need to do is split the UV window over here, switch the bottom one to the shader editor. Nice haircut, Ken. Thank you. It suits you. Yeah, I'm usually pretty lazy when it comes to my hair. I cut it pretty short, and then I let it grow out for, maybe like 2 months on average, and it gets a longer how it was last week. And then I cut it all off again just because I don't like to bother with it too much. But thank you. I appreciate the compliment. And yeah, don't hesitate to ask questions. Again, most of you probably know that, but I will periodically check, make sure I'm not missing any questions. And yes, so right, I opened up the shader editor because I need to, in cycles, I need to have a image texture created and that node selected for the baking process. So I will hit new, and 1024 should be fine. We'll call it rock DVC for dirty vertex color. We do not need an alpha channel, and that's going to be fine. Let's go open that image over here. All right, so now I can go to our render tab, switch to cycles, because Eevee does not do baking currently. And all right, I want to bake the dirty vertex colors, well, just the vertex colors. And to access them, I'm going to add vertex COL. All right, so that is the vertex information. If I switch to look dev, all right, shift control clicking on the attribute, the top color attribute shows us that information. And now since I've set that up through a viewer node, that shift control click is the node wrangler add-on, and it plugs that into a viewer node, which is just an emission node. And so I want to bake the emission value, emit. And the margin will set to 10 pixels. And clear image is fine. All right, now we should be able to bake and get that detail applied to a texture. Perfect. I will save this into our global texture directory, rock DVC. That should be fine. Black and white because there is no actual color information. Save a little bit of file space. Excellent. Now we don't need this rock anymore. We can simply apply the texture right over here. Awesome. So we've maintained the low res geometry, but have that high detailed vertex color information. All right. And so from here, we don't need the previous color information, vertex color information. Let's plug that rock texture into this color ramp. So now we have more of a color toned, a color tone to this information. Plug that into the principled BSDF, and there we go. It's not done. We can now use this information to also affect the roughness and the specularity. I can't remember why this Voronoi texture is here, but I'm going to get rid of it. And something about breaking the matrix. All right, so I'm going to use the color ramp also, Shift Control D, and then I'm going to reset it. In the in panel up at the top, the items tab, you can just reset any node so that we get the black and white. And now I can set this up for use as specular. So the black values will be no reflectivity. The white values will be high reflectivity. And I think, let me see, I'm going to switch to B-spline. Just kind of bring up, I don't want it to be that reflective. And let me think through this. If you think through how a rock, in theory, I suppose that the crevices will be non-reflective because it's going to gather the most grime. And then the edges, which we see highlighted in the brighter color, it's going to be like scuffed, right? So that's not going to be reflective either. So I guess the in-between gray color is going to be the most reflective if we think about it, in theory. I'm going to roll with that. And therefore, I'm going to switch back to linear for the color ramp. And so if you think, what that means is we need the gray color to be bright and we need the edges to be black. So I can add another flag and make it black, then bring the white flag into the middle. And so you'll see what this does. As I bring the black flag down, it's darkening our edges, leaving the crevices black as well. And then the gray middle tones are still have the white, meaning they will reflect the most. So I think something like this will be good for reflection, though I don't want complete reflection. I don't want a value of white. I want it pretty low, like maybe 0.2. We don't want the rock to be super reflective, but purely diffuse is also not ideal. So I'm going to plug this into specularity. All right, do we see much of an effect? A little bit. You can see like these edges, these white spots are not reflecting at all. And the crevices also are not reflecting at all. But we're not quite done. We need to duplicate this again. And for the roughness, we essentially need to flip the values, meaning the dark flags, I want them to be bright, like, white, because white roughness means pure diffuse. So I'm going to switch those to white. And then the darkness, I want that to be like 0.4 roughness. All right, how does that leave us? Really, if you think about how technical all of that was and you just zoom out, all I'm trying to do is break up the surface according to what would make sense. So now as I orbit around the rock, it's not globally reflective. There's a little bit of intention behind what is reflecting and what's not. And that's essentially all I'm trying to do. So we could probably, I actually think this is fine. I think this reads like a rock. It's got enough of the detail using that, the roughness and specular, like being intentional with those. So I think this is fine. This will be good. Let me organize the scene. Let's call it rock, maybe rock underscore geo. And then the collection will just be rock. And I can save a new version of this one, version 2, and then save it again as the final version. So I go up a directory and save it as just rock in the rock folder. All right. Yeah, so we're done with the rock. We've tied up that loose end from the last stream. Now we can move on to a fun part. I guess, so when I say a fun part, I honestly think most of CG is quite fun, but each part, I like to move on to the next part. I like to make enough progress to move on to the next part. And now we are moving on. We've created enough assets. We can move on to the next part, and that is fun and exciting. So I'm going to create a new scene file. What? New general. And let's think through how this assembly will be. I'm creating the environment. I'm going to start with the ocean and with the beach, right? From there, we'll be able to build, that will give us the groundwork, literally the groundwork, pun intended, I guess, to apply the trees and the bushes and the rocks to. All right, so I'm going to get rid of the lamp and cube. And then for the camera, I guess that's what I probably need to set up first. I'm going to Alt R and G to reset the transformations, and then RX 90. This will leave our camera facing exactly down the y-axis, and that's just how I like to set up my scene, you know, according to the axes. It's just gonna, I don't know, it just makes sense. And also to focus the scene around the origin of the world makes sense, rather than like randomly moving the camera off over here. Like there's just not much reason to do that. But there's some tools that work best, you know, using the center of the world. Like for example, Shift C. If I'm over here, Shift C will focus at the center of the world and any objects that are around it. I also move the cursor to the center. Anyway, I'm making a big explanation for why I do this, but I'm going to build the scene from the center of the world out. That's the takeaway, I guess. Looks like I have a question. When did this class start? So technically it's not a class. This is just a stream series, and we're on week 3. So 2 weeks ago is when we started. I'm expecting to have at least one more week, which I need to add to the schedule. Next week should finish the still frame. But then someone mentioned, like, how could we animate the trees, you know, with little rustles in the leaves for wind, the ocean, animating that, basically turning it into an animatable file. So I might do a stream on that, but currently I only have one more planned for next week. Oh no, am I going really fast today? I can try and slow it down. I guess I would prefer that rather than being slow and not covering enough information. I can slow it down. All right, so we've got the camera set, and I need something to focus on. And if you remember, let me drag out an image editor, the 2D image editor, and then open the render I've already done. All right, that is in, I can't remember, IMG Tropical Beach 01. Right, so this is essentially what I'm recreating. This is the research and development version, and so what we have Melvin in the center, right? He gives a little bit of character flair to the image, and I want to add him right now. So I actually have him from the rehearsal version, but let me grab my file explorer. All right, so if you remember, I've done two versions of the project, a rehearsal version, R&D, and then a recorded version, which is what you're watching. In the R&D, the lib character file, I have Melvin. So I'm going to copy him and put him in the recorded version library character and paste him there. All right, just so we're not, crossing over the multiple projects. So file, I'm going to link Melvin in, because we are going to do this project based on linking, and as it, you'll see why that's useful as we go. But essentially, it's like it's leaving the character or whatever asset in the original file, but like substituting him in like a temporary form or like a non-local form. You'll see why it's useful. So I need to go find him in the character Melvin and collection, the Melvin collection. All right, so there's Melvin. I'm going to rotate him around 180 degrees and make him face out. That's what that's the way the ocean is going to be. The horizon is going to be that way. From Omar, question: I've noticed cameras in 2.8 have a yellow rectangle in the lens. Is that a glitch? I don't think it's a glitch, although it does kind of behave funny. Sometimes it's white and sometimes it's yellow, depending on how we're looking at it. Like you can see it kind of flashing, hopefully. Oh, wait, that's just my mouse over the selection. Yeah, I don't know what that's about, honestly. I just assumed it was like a 2.8 visual update to the widgets or whatever. But I don't know, maybe it is a glitch. It's not bothered me too much. So I've got Melvin in the scene. Now we can build the rest of the environment around him. So let's look in the camera. I can do that with the 0 key on the number pad. And I need to, according to this version over here, he's pretty small in the frame. So let's move back the camera with GZZ. That moves it in its local axis straight backward. And then maybe move it up slightly, though it looks like he's pretty centered in the frame. Maybe I go back a little bit further. He seems smaller over here. All right, I think that's pretty good for now. We can always adjust this. Okay, great. We've got the building blocks started, camera position. Now let's create the beach with a mesh plane. And I suppose I can leave the object origin right there under Melvin, and we're going to move it back behind the camera because obviously we don't want to see the beach end. And then we'll scale it according to the camera. All right, we just need to scale it beyond the limit to the frame border. All right, so like this, and I guess the backside doesn't need to be that wide. You'll see why I kind of make this cone shape when it comes to the ocean, and all we're doing is just creating only what's in camera and not doing any unnecessary work outside of the camera frame. All right, so that's the beach. Maybe move it a little bit forward actually, because we are going to have an intersection between the ocean and the beach. So Melvin's gonna be standing like in the surf, right where the ocean waves come up and then retreat, and there's that like kind of residue water left over. That's where he's standing. So the ocean is going to intersect it not far in front of him. Let me make sure that those verts, okay, moving it forward, the verts are now inside the camera frame. So I'm gonna move those out. And then also a beach needs to be rotated, right? Like it's a slight decline into the ocean, and that's why like the ocean stops at a certain point. So we need to rotate this according to our 3D cursor. Very slight. I don't need a big decline or anything. Some beaches do have a steeper incline or decline. I'm just going to leave it pretty subtle like this. Excellent. So that's going to be our beach object. I'm going to try and stay on top of naming things, keeping this organized. Beach geo, I suppose. And also, you might be wondering, like, what we've created like assets separate in their own blend files, like the trees, the rock, bushes, but this beach and the ocean are not going to be part of their own blend file. That's how I find makes the most sense. Like if you build everything in libraries in linkable assets, it's pretty hard to work with in the assembly file, because if this were its own asset, I couldn't tab in here and change the vert information or change the material information according to the scene. So there's kind of a balance. There's certain objects in the scene that will only exist locally, like the beach, the ocean, and probably the islands in the background. But the trees and the easily duplicated things exist in their own .blend file. All right, so now let me add another mesh plane, and this is going to be the ocean. So this brings up the concept of scale and exactly how big is the scene. Now, I'm not going to go to the trouble of measuring like a realistic distance of the ocean to the realistic size of islands in the background. I'm again going to try and walk the line in the middle. I am going to make the scene pretty big, so I'm just kind of eyeballing how big the scene is, which we quickly run out of space because of the camera clipping value. So let's adjust that because we can't really do much without fixing that. So in the in panel, the view tab, Blender's default clip value is pretty low for a large scene. And I'm going to change that from 1,000 meters to, I'm just going to add a 0, 10,000 meters. Now, I guess that also brings up the question of how big is Melvin in meters. He might be pretty big in general. Tool, let's see, item, scale. It doesn't give us a dimension. I can create a cube, because I want to say Melvin is to a theoretical scale. 2 meters is about the size of a human, right? Can someone confirm that? I think so. I guess I could look it up myself. But I think 2 meters, if meter, no, I'm getting those confused with yards. Yikes, what is, let's see here. I can do the conversion. 2 meters to feet. Okay, yeah, that's a 6.5 foot person. 1.8 meters is okay. All right, so yeah, Melvin is, let's see, where was I? Melvin is about real world scale if he was a real character. So he is about 1.3 meters, yeah, so he is actual scale. I'm glad to know that. So this means that the scene we're building is in the ballpark of being true scale. All right, so I added a 0 to the clip plane. This gives us a lot more room to move back the size of the ocean. And, just keeping an eye on the size of the beach we created. I actually need to go back further, I think. I'm going to scale this out according to the median. Let me see, a couple questions. From Omar, have you ever done like a city scene in Blender, meaning you have used miles and miles of the viewport? I've never done a city in Blender that I recall. I don't think I've ever done a city, but but this is kind of the case. Like this is, I don't know if it's miles and miles, but it's going to be pretty big. But no, I've never done like a real world, here's an entire city block full, or entire city with that many miles. I don't think it's that big of an issue. Like it's just computer and math. Like it should be able to handle it. But there's a lot of due diligence in making sure that everything's to scale. And I don't usually do that if you've watched my tutorials. I just like to create according to how it looks in the viewport, just so that it looks good. All right, so I'm scaling, but when I look in the camera, I want to, again, scale the ocean out to just be beyond the frame of the camera. However, the camera also has a clipping value, and it's even lower. So if we select the camera, look at the camera data, and wait. Oh, I'm not. Oh, I'm in edit mode. Now in object mode, select the camera. The clip end is only 100 meters. So I think I need to make this like 10,000 meters. I think that aligns now with the viewport. And now we can see the end of the ocean. I just want to scale that beyond the camera frame. Same thing with the front of the ocean. All right. And so this is essentially creating the field of view of our camera. And we've got a pretty big ocean at this point. But luckily, we won't be spending too much time looking at the overall scene. But I feel better that it's reasonably to scale. Now, our islands are going to be probably smaller than actual islands would be. But, you know, when thinking through this process, as a still frame, you can do a lot of forced perspective. So you can make the scene, the ocean, a lot smaller, the island smaller. However, that is going to fall apart if you try to do any animation. And I kind of want to keep animation potential there in case I want to turn this scene into an environment for a character to be animated or for a camera, you know, movement, something like that. So I am erring on the side of building it more to scale than not to scale. So yeah, we've got the ocean set up. Let's rename this Ocean Geo. And I think at this point we're ready to start adding some materials and giving it a little more context. Yeah, I think that's what I had planned. Let me answer this question. Could you go over some of the major reasons why it's useful to have assets in their own blend files and then assemble them into another? Yeah, okay, so I kind of started talking about that but didn't really finish it. So the trees, for example, what's nice about having them in a library is that as I create the scene, you know, we might come to a point, well, I'm almost certain we will, where it's like, I want the materials to be a little bit different. I want to adjust them, and I want all of the trees to inherit that that change. Now you can share data, yes, but the library is just a little cleaner. It's its own blend file. You can link them in. It's I'm going to get to the limit of my technical knowledge on exactly why. Like, I don't know if there's memory savings or like file space savings specifically, but I know that it's how all professionals do it. Yeah, the referencing system in other packages. So what I find it useful for is when I want to make a change, I can just jump over to that blend file on the trees, alter them a little bit, load my file up, and they're all they've inherited that change. You're probably sitting there asking, well, so does shared data. But I'm just blanking on exactly why. I'm blanking on exactly why shared data is less desirable than linking in libraries. I need to look that up and have a definite answer. I know if Wayne were here, he would give you a couple reasons. I'll get back to you on if there's exact reasons. I hate not having the reason, but other than it's just the way the pros do it. All right, so yeah, I want to create some materials. 10,000 meters is about 6.2 miles. Okay, nice. That's kind of that in my head seems reasonable for how far the ocean should be visible. Yeah, so I want to create the materials now for the ocean first. Let's start there. Was I do anything else? Lost my train of thought a little bit. No, I think we're ready to start that. Now, since I've got this little viewport over here with the reference render opened, I'm not going to switch my workspaces anymore. I'm just going to modify the one I have available. So I'm going to split a window open. Oh, Omar, looks like you're giving us some good reasons. If you have multiple dot blends, shared data won't be as good. But if you have multiple dot blends, then asset changes will propagate, which link data on a single dot blend won't do. Omar knows what's up. I'm going to switch to the shader editor for the bottom here, and let's create a material. Let's call it Ocean. Ocean. That's simple enough. Now, the big attribute with the ocean, the characteristic that I want is a gradient, right? So we have a white color at where the ocean meets the shore. That is going to be like representative of the surf. And then you've got like that tropical, very bright aqua green. And then it gets to a darker, more deep blue the further we get out into the ocean. And I want to create that now with a Shift A texture gradient texture. And Shift Control clicking on the gradient. Let's go to Look Dev over here. And I don't see anything actually. Let me Control T, add a mapping node, texture coordinates, and switch to the texture version, the texture mode, and I should be able to rotate 90 degrees in Z. There we go. Now we see the gradient from black at the start all the way to white. It's going in the direction of the ocean distance, which is what I want. So now I can add a converter color ramp and explicitly create the flags of color that I want. So if we look at it like this, this orientation matches our color ramp. And we've got black, which will need to be white. So we can just swap those, I suppose. And then the next flag will be that bright aqua green, something like this. And then the black flag will be a deep navy blue, like this. All right, so now, let's see, I'll switch to B-spline. Anytime I use B-spline, it's for a smoother transition between the flags. And I can drag this up. But we're going to run into a bit of a limitation because we have a really small color ramp, but a very large ocean piece of geometry. So I can drag the color ramp out as far as it will go to get a little bit more manipulation, like room to manipulate these flags. But it's going to be compressed really, really tight up front. So if I zoom in on Melvin, keeping an eye on the scale. So I kind of want it to look right from above like this. But the most important thing is how good it looks in the viewport, or in the camera, I'm sorry. All right, so in the camera, there's a large amount of white, but not enough of the teal, aqua color, and the navy blue. So I need to crush these even further. There we go. I think that's a good gradient. All right, so that makes sense. Usually that color is concentrated on the shore. Once you get further out to sea, it's, you know, a darker blue. All right, so we've got the color gradient established. I can plug this into the base color of our principal BSDF, Shift Control click on that. And by default, there is going to be some reflectivity in the principal BSDF, but we don't even have a world environment set up. So that's going to be the next step. In our world, well, let's think about it. I need to grab an HDRI texture. So let me switch to the old Chrome browser. All right, let's go to HDRI Haven. This is the only place I go to for HDRIs anymore. Just started supporting them on Patreon. It's such a good site. Skies, and we could use what I'm looking for is like a bright blue, tropical kind of day. A few clouds in the sky. I mean, maybe clouds aren't that important, but that is kind of going to be the final look. And I have one that I like. Let me see if I can find it. I mean, this one would work, probably Delta 2. But this one right here, Symmetrical Garden, I know I like this one. So I'm going to click on it. Let's download it. We just need 1K. We don't really need it to be much bigger than that. So I think I can just save the link as, nope. Whoops. Okay, so it's downloading. Let me go put that in the proper folder. Downloads, Symmetrical Garden, Control X. I'm going to put that in the global texture directory, lib texture. It's already in there, but I'm going to overwrite it. All right, so we've got an HDRI that we can plug into our environment now. In the color, let's choose environment texture and open that. source scene record lib text. There we go. Now I'm looking in look dev, which we can choose scene world and scene lights, but at that point, when you start using those, you might as well just do rendered mode. All right, so here's where we see the environment illuminating our scene and also how it looks in the viewport. Obviously, we're not going to have trees growing in the ocean. And honestly, we're not going to see, we're going to add a billboard in the back that has a cloud texture to be very artistically, specifically what we want. So we're not even going to see the world at all. But just for the sake of it making more sense, I am going to move the texture down so we don't see the tree line at all. I'm going to go to Object World in the shader editor, Control T to add texture coordinate and mapping. And just like in the 3D view, I want it to move down, which would be Z. So I can take the location of Z and move it this way. All right, so now we've got some clouds visible. And temporarily, that will help us judge the reflectivity of the ocean. But we are going to add a billboard to represent the final sky texture. Tobles has a question. Do you have some other free resources that you can share? Yes, definitely. I think I made a post about this. I thought I did. cgcookie.com. I know I went over recently. Was it a blog post? Somewhere there were free resources. Maybe I didn't write an article about it. Yes, so I'll tell you real quick that my go-to places for images, HDRI textures, HDRI Haven for sure. For reference imagery, that's CC0. I love unsplash.com. That's not it. Unsplash has very high quality, like stock photography quality images that are CC0, and it's a wide range, so it's never really let me down too much. On top of that, you can maybe, I wouldn't find textures here necessarily, except I will find the environment, the cloud texture we will find here. But I also like Pixabay. Here you can find more texture, photos, but also texture like, let's try leather texture. And you'll get a few options here. And these are all CC0. Free for commercial use, no attribution required. So images are what I find most often. Pixabay, there's also Pexels, PEXLS.com. This is similar, and also it often shares photos with Pixabay specifically. But like if I type leather texture, I really need to create a resource of some kind that has all my. This is deja vu for me. I know I've talked to a member. I know that we've even created a Google Doc about free resources. But so that's images at least. For models, Blend Swap. I'll go to Blend Swap for 3D Blender models. But not all of them are CC0. You have to obey the license. Is there anything else that I like to go to? I mean, when I do add sound effects for animations, like Freesound is probably the biggest one I go to. Yeah, freesound.org. But make sure you find the right license. Anyway, that's a quick overview, but I need to spend more time on that and create a good, useful resource. All right, so we've got our world set up. Let me make sure that, Omar, are you using the Eevee engine right now? I should be. Yes, I am. Yeah, so it's rapid, fast. So we definitely know Eevee's being used. Right, so I'm moving on to the reflection quality on the ocean. Let us switch back to the object context for our shader editor. And oh no, so I'm not in cycles from the baking. I created a new scene. Remember, in the rock file, it is still using the cycles engine, but in the new scene, Eevee is the default, I guess. I thought cycles was the default for 2.8, but maybe they switched that recently. Or months ago, and I just never noticed. So reflection quality, roughness at 0.5 is obviously way too high to be an ocean. We want it lower, like 0.05. Now it's reflecting like a watery surface. However, it is, I think, reflecting maybe a little bit too much, because the lower we go in our specular, the more that color is going to come back, you know, that color gradient we established, which I do like. If we look in the reference image, we're going to have to balance out how much reflection versus how much color is showing through. And I'm not really sure if it's photorealistic or physically accurate or anything, but that's the beauty of stylization. Who cares? I just want it to look right. I want it to look good, according to my own, you know, choice. And so I am going to control the reflection with a, let's see, I basically need another gradient. So let's control it with a input layer weight, basically Fresnel, like a manual Fresnel. Let's put this underneath, because it's going to be plugged into the specular. I will also try to avoid making a spaghetti mess out of the materials. I know that can be hard to follow sometimes. Right, so the layer weight, if we add a converter color ramp, we can plug in the facing value and then control. Let's see, where's the black at? Okay, there it is. Yeah, so we can use this, maybe if I switch to the B-spline again, just for a smoother transition. Add another black flag and then crush that value up. All right, so the black would be no reflection and the white would be full reflection. We don't want it to be full. We want it to be what we set, like what was it, 0.05? No, that's the roughness. Maybe 0.1? What did I set that as? Right now it's at 0.04. Okay, so let's leave it at 0.1 and see how that looks, plugging in this color ramp. All right, so now you can see as I unplug and replug that in, the dark ocean has more reflection than the teal color. The teal color has less reflection, is therefore more vibrant of a color. Though maybe I could increase this a little bit, like maybe 0.2. There we go. I think I like that. All right, so that is the specular level. For the roughness, it should be just a global value since it's water. Like, it shouldn't change. So what is the roughness set to? 0.05? Let's see. I'm gonna pause on that value, because what's also going to be important in this ingredient in the shader is that the ingredient of the normal, the bump map. So let me add. We're going to accomplish that very simply with a texture, Voronoi texture. There it is, my trusty Voronoi. And when we plug this into a vector bump map as the height, and then the height into the normal, it should be way too strong at first. Or maybe it's not the right value. It's not the right size. Yeah, okay, so this is supposed to represent ocean waves. We need it much, much smaller visually. So we need to increase the scale value to, like, I don't know, 1,000 maybe? Let's see what that looks like plugged into the bump now. Let's look in the... Okay, now we can see that sort of ocean pattern. Although maybe we need to... Maybe the bump value needs to be increased because the object is so large. I think I remember that being a thing. Oh, that's too strong. How about... Okay. I don't think that's a thing. Maybe it's too strong. What about 0.1? Or maybe my reflection is not enough. Maybe I need to have more reflection. It looks okay in the camera. Let's make this dark flag like... Hold on a second. Why can't I select that flag? There it is. 0.2. So let's make this one 0.1. Maybe point, yeah, let's just go 0.1. Oh, I think I know what the issue. There we go. I was looking for the sparkles, you know, like on the ocean, the sun reflecting on the ocean. How does that look? I think that looks pretty good. Maybe the waves are a little bit too small. Let's go to like 750. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. The reflection kind of breaks down whenever we zoom out of the camera, and that's because I'm using that Fresnel value. And if we look at that by itself, in the camera it looks fine, but as soon as we rotate out, it turns most of the ocean into a black, like no reflection range. So if we don't like that, if we want this to make a little more sense in 3D in general, I won't use the layer weight, but I'll use this color ramp again. Right, so instead of the colors, I can, let's see, I can just pick like the blue. Let's turn them into our light color, which was 0.25 or 0.2. So 0.2, there we go. Same with this, 0.2. And then the teal color, let's make that 0.1. And then the white flag is going to be 0. All right, so now we have that similar kind of gradient, but it should look a little bit better in 3D if we change that to the specular value. Yeah, okay, so now we have much more reflection in general as we zoom out, but it should still look okay in the camera. Maybe a little bit too much reflection in the 0.2. Anyway, I'm kind of nitpicking. This is going to be good. I can move on. It does look better in 3D, which I do like. All right, question from Omar. Does your Blender behave that if you click Use Nodes in the World tab, the values you enter there will no longer work and you have to go to the node editor from then on? But in 2.7x, those were linked and it didn't matter. So let's see. I think you're talking about, so I click Use Nodes, but that should be on by default. And I should still be able to increase the strength from over here. Is that what you mean, Omar? In the World tab, I still am able to change these values, just like I can in the node editor. Okay, so we address the ocean. Now we need to address the sand. Let's get that looking nicer. All right, so I'll select the beach object, add a new material. We'll call this beach. All right, and we're going to do the same sort of thing where I'm going to have the sand get wider as it gets to the ocean surf, and it's going to be darker the closer it gets to the camera. So the exact same situation where we add a texture, gradient texture, Control T to add a mapping node, and then rotate it 90 degrees. All right, so we look at that. And yes, that's what I want. No, it's not. Oh, I moved the location 90 degrees. I want to rotate in Z 90 degrees. Using the texture mode. There we go. Messed up a couple steps there. Save, yes, thank you. File, save as. This is going to be an assembly file, and we're going to call it Tropical Beach 01. Assembly 01. Thank you, Save Police. You saved me a lot of heartache. Next, let's add a converter color ramp where we can explicitly choose the colors of the sand that we want. The darkness we want to be, let's see. Let's try this, copy that color, paste it to the other flag, and then just brighten it. Make it a little bit brighter, desaturate it slightly. All right, let's see what that looks like in the camera. But then turn off specularity. We don't want any reflection, at least not now. Plug it into the base color, see what that looks like. Now, interestingly, did you see how bright the sand got? Even though we're not using specular or roughness, there's no sheen, there's really nothing happening. Just the principled BSDF by itself does brighten the color. We got the color information by itself much darker, but plug it into the principled BSDF and it's lighter. I don't really know why. I don't know if it's the lighting of the scene is just illuminating it that much. Maybe that must be what it is. But anyway, just keep that in mind that you can't necessarily, you have to trust what the final shader output is. Omar, your 2.8 doesn't behave that way? Uh-oh. Well, I know if you're on a Mac, I know Wayne has been complaining about, I think the Mac version of 2.8 specifically seems to have a lot more issues with crashing and stuff right now compared to mine. He's always talking about how it's crashing on him, but I don't experience the same crashes. So I don't know, maybe they favor Linux since they all use that as at the developers at the studio. All right, I think that gradient looks pretty nice for the sand. Next, let's add some like waviness to the sand pattern with, you guessed it, just like we did with the ocean, it's going to be a texture, Voronoi texture. All right, now if we plug that up right away in the camera, you can kind of see how we're going to get this wavy pattern. All I'm trying to do is get waves of light streaks and then waves of dark patches. And we can do that perfectly with the Voronoi texture. Though I might need to add a mapping node. Let's hit Control T, and then we don't need a second texture coordinate. So let's use, I'll use generated. All right. At the end of this video, you might want to visit Blender Development and see what Omar Ahmad has been cooking for nodes in 2.8. Oh, I have. Omar, I like Omar because he helped me when I was switching to Linux. He helped me with a big problem that was driving me nuts. He helped me with that. And then come to find out, he's like working on the Summer of Code on nodes. So he's like one of my favorite people right now. But yes, I love the work he's doing with the Voronoi stuff, like the major level up in features and what we can do with the new Voronoi stuff. I'm super excited for that to get into Trunk. Right, so with the Voronoi texture, I do want to adjust the scale. I want to kind of compress it along the beach. So instead of this broad pattern, basically when I look at the beach from above, it doesn't look good. It looks fine in the camera view, but I still want it to look decent in the overall 3D world. So let me scale either in X, I think it's maybe Y that I should scale up. Yeah, I just want to compress it this way a little bit. And then I can add a color, mix RGB as, let's try a soft light. There we go. Right away, that looks much more like a beach. Although, what about overlay? They look pretty similar. Let's see what that looks like plugged into the principled BSDF. Yes, I love that. Something else about the camera view, the default being able to see outside the camera, I don't like that. I like to change that and turn it to complete black, just because it's hard for me to ignore how busted outside the camera frame gets. So I'm going to select camera. It's like on par. It's one of my pet peeves, on par with like people who work in orthographic mode. It's fine if you do that, but like Wayne works in orthographic. I hope he sees this and I give him a hard time. But he works in orthographic like this, and it drives me nuts. When I open up his files, it's like, Wayne, what are you doing? How does this make sense to you? But somehow it does. He's completely professional. But I don't like working in orthographic, nor do I like the camera passer par 2 being halfway visible. So I'm going to change that under the camera settings, viewport display, passer par 2, opacity all the way up. There we go. Now I can trust what I'm seeing in the viewport, and I see the more final result. Maybe he does do that just to drive me crazy. I wouldn't put it past Mr. Dixon. All right, so I've got the sand, mostly built. What am I forgetting? I think I am forgetting something. Oh yeah, sparkles in the sand, to represent little grains of sand. If we look close on the render, I did add those, and it's just a nice little effect to make it feel more like sand. Oh, and the surf too, like the reflective part underneath Melvin. I got to address that while I'm thinking of it. So right now the ocean intersects right at Melvin's feet. If I move the ocean plane down, it will essentially move the surf outward. There we go. Yeah, there's a couple things we got to do. Right now the ocean's perfectly flat across the surf, so we need to there's plenty to do. But right now I'm going to add the sparkles in the sand with let's just do a noise texture, the trusty noise texture. Voronoi and noise I use all the time. You guys are probably sick of it. Like get new tricks, but the old tricks aren't broken. All right, so we're using the noise as I guess the generated is fine. I guess that's fine. Yeah, generated noise texture. Let's look at that and add a converter color ramp. I know I'm going to crush the values because that's going to give me the specs, but the scale is way too small. We want this to be like 2000 or something crazy. To judge the scale, I'm going to look at Melvin at his feet, and that'll help me determine, like, are the specs too big? Are they too small? I mean, we're not going literal grains of sand, but just for the effect. This is stylized, so we have some freedom here. All right, as I crush the black up, now we're getting into more of that speckle range. Yeah, I think that should be fine. All right, now let's, how are we going to incorporate this into the material? I think I'll just do it with specular. Right now there is 0 spec, but if I make all the white dots reflect, we should get a decent effect. So let me plug that straight into specular. See what it does. Yeah, that's pretty much the effect I wanted. We're only going to see it, of course, if we're really, really close, which I like. I want it to be subtle. But if we ever animate the camera, I think there'll be a nice little glitz and speckle to the sand surface. Yeah, I think that helps read a little more like sand. What about the roughness? Oh, the roughness is at 0. Let me go up to like 0.3. That can actually have a pretty big effect. It's more broad of a reflection if I go up, and you can see it, more often from more angles. But if I go down, you can see it gets like sharper reflection. I think that's going to be fine, like 0.4, maybe 0.2, just kind of depends. I don't really dislike any of the options. All right, let me save my file. Just while I'm thinking about it, am I missing any questions? Oh, Andrew Price works in orthographic. I didn't know that. It's funny that it drives you nuts too. Maybe it's good for like architecture. He does a lot of that, but anyway. All right, so what are we doing? We've added the specs. Now I want to add, now that I'm looking at the reference, maybe I can rotate the Voronoi pattern around a little bit, or in the z-axis, not make it quite so like horizontal. Whoops. That is doing something, right? Oh, it's at a point. Let me change it to texture. I got to redo all this. Because texture will allow me to rotate it how I want. There we go. There we go. A nice little angle to all of that. Ooh, you can see the specs. Look at that. right, so this kind of tells me that it is too sharp of a reflection. So maybe I will increase the roughness to like 0.4. There we go. Yeah, I like how the specks are showing up now. That's fun. Maybe increase the overlay value. Yeah, that looks more like the reference. A little more definition to the sand. Sweet. All right, now I want to add the surf to the ocean shader, as well as this I don't know what to call it, but when the ocean waves retreat, there's a little bit of like residue, like a thin film of water, of ocean water, where it's very reflective right past the surf. I want to add that. I also need to update the geometry so that the surf is not flat across. Let's start with that. Control S, and then, yeah, basically all I need to do is increase the geometry in the front up here. So I'm going to cut a few edge loops. Maybe just select everything and subdivide. Face, is it edge? Oh, edge, subdivide. A couple times. I don't need the geometry to be that heavy. And then, oh, I can also use dynamic topology. I should be able to jump into sculpt mode. Enable dynamic topology. First, I want to go to the header, right click on any of these, buttons, header, show tool settings, enable dynamic topology, vertex data detected. Oh, the default UV map. I don't need the UV map. So let's try that again. Awesome. And I think I can sculpt this and it maintains the material. So we're like sculpting in Eevee. It's cool that we can do that. Let me grab my pen real quick. And all I want to do is subtly add divots and ridges in the sand material, in the sand object. So I can make my brush really subtle. And, the regular brush is going to be fine. But yeah, you can see that as I add to the surface and add a ridge, it eats into the ocean surf and we get a wavy pattern. So that's what I want to do. I do not want it to be mirrored. I want to turn off overlays so that I don't see the grid. And I want it to be pretty subtle. So I'm going to push in some areas, push out other areas. Also, let's make the detail size, let's see, 5. Since I'm pretty far from the object in general, maybe maximize the view. All right, so regular stroke, then I'll hold control, regular stroke. There we go. All that's serving to do is make the surface of the ocean, of the beach, not even anymore. I don't know, maybe it's worth it to do to the rest of the beach, just to add a tiny bit of variation. But most white sand beaches are pretty flat, as I recall. The sand further from the water should be dry, less sparkly, but I'm being picky. The sand further from the water should be dry and less sparkly. So the sparkles, I don't mean them to represent like wet sand, but just that it is sand. It's a bunch of little particles together. It's just like a cheap way to sell that effect. That's all I'm trying to do. But yeah, now I want to add a reflective pass to the very front of the material that represents a wet sand. So anyway, I think that this should be fine for the ocean surf. Let's look at it in the camera. And yeah, we can see a little bit of unevenness now where the ocean meets the sand. Let me save my file. You could do watercolor painting. Whoa, what happened here? So in object mode, it seems that the beach inherited, I don't know, like swirly patterns from the sculpt strokes that we made. That's kind of odd. Does it look bad in the camera view? No, but it kind of bothers me because when you look in the bigger the broader 3D world, it does look bad. So let me think. It must have something to do with the texture coordinates. What if I use object coordinates? Okay, yeah, the swirls are gone there. it means the scale value is wrong. Let's go to 0.1, 0.3, 0.2. Interesting. When I use the generated, we get that swirl pattern for some reason. I wonder what that's about. Maybe it has something to do with the auto texture space. I'm not going to try and figure that out. I can just use the object coordinates and we're fine. We no longer get that swirly pattern. Okie doke. Now for the reflective part that represents a wet bit of sand. All right, I'm going to use the same kind of, what am I trying to say? The gradient plus a color ramp. Let's just duplicate this. Shift Control D to maintain the connection. I will reset the node. Let's look at that and then crush the blacks as so that we get a white concentration right near the surface, right near the ocean surf. And I need to vary this up, and we can do that by adding some noise texture and mix it with the vector data. This is kind of an interesting trick that someone turned me on to recently, like in the last few months. I've done it in a couple tutorials, but I forgot who I first saw do this. I didn't know that you could use regular color mix RGB nodes, color mix RGB with vector data. I did not know that, but you can. So if we take this mapping coordinate and then mix in a noise texture, let's look at that. Oh wait, first look at it plugged into, I'm missing some components. I need another gradient texture. Shift D, plug the output of the mix into the vector, then that into the color ramp. And make it more subtle, but yeah, check that out. So we've just mixed the noise texture into the vector data of our texture coordinates. Super cool. Let me actually use the object here as whoa. No, I'm going to leave it. Yeah, anyway, let me step back. Mixing in the noise texture actually has some really neat effects. I'm going to maybe scale down the value. All I want to do is, that's what I was afraid of. I'm getting the swirly pattern, which is what I avoided with the sand material. So I really do need to be using the object coordinates, I guess. Let me plug that into, let's see what breaks when I plug it into this. All right, nothing breaks up here. So since it's using the object coordinates, it focuses like on where the object origin is, which is at the center. That's why you see the gradient like aligned there. But what happens to this color ramp? Okay, so I should just have to alter this a bit. You know what? I need another mapping node. Because this is way too compressed. I need to scale this out. So if I Shift Control D, duplicate the mapping node. It's getting a little cluttered in here. I just need to scale in, is it Y? No, it's not Y. It must be, yeah, it is. No, it's not Y. Is it X? Yeah. All right, so now when I scale up in X, move backward in, I'm just kind of jumping around here. Try and follow me if you can. But I'm scaling in X, which broadens the range of the gradient texture. And I need to then move, or maybe for this ramp, maybe I'm kind of, you're seeing the problem solving. We were talking about that earlier. Hopefully you can appreciate me flip-flopping. I am going to use the generated for this because I know that works. So let me just stick to that. All right, so only for the gradient of the sand color will I use a generated input. And then for the other one, I'm going to use an object coordinate. Sorry, that was probably quite confusing. And now what does this look like when I mix the noise texture? Ah, there we go. So increase the factor on the mixture. Yeah, and so increasing the noise scale will serve to make the pattern. Remember, all we're trying to do is break up the pattern so it's not so perfectly flat. And once we do that, I really want this to be more strong. Ah, I'm getting that spiral pattern again. Okay, I think this is fine. It's not that big of a deal. We've broken up the pattern enough. We could try and change maybe the mix to be an overlay. Nope, that's not it. That's going to be fine. That's really all I wanted to do, is just break up the edge. I feel like I got way too confusing there. Kind of confused myself. But now that that's set up, I can essentially mix in, I want to mix in this white part into the specular component, like make it reflective. So I need to, let's see, I need to add it to this specular right here. So that's the little speckles that we created. Rita likes the spirals. I just feel like it doesn't look great from above, but you know, it's fine. It's fine. I'm being a little too picky. Save, definitely save. Omar, is this file available for download? I would like to put a volcano erupting in the background and leave Melvin as is. That's a good idea. I will make them available. I guess I was expecting to do that at the end of the project. But yeah, is that okay if I do that at the end of the project so all the files are done and you can play with them as you wish rather than doing like incremental uploads? Let me know if that's okay. The noise texture is causing the swirls because it still has generated coordinates. Spiky, I think you're exactly right. I think you are exactly right. Let me grab the object coordinates into the vector. Ah, that is what I expected to see. Thank you, Spiky. 12 gold stars for you. Take a sip of my ginger ale. My tummy's been hurting. All right, Spiky. Yes, thank you. That's exactly what the issue was. No more spirals, and this is the kind of breakup pattern I was expecting to see. So I need to make it smaller. Ah, yeah, that is what I wanted. Spiky, you're awesome. Perfect. All right, that's much more intuitive for adjusting that. All right, now I want to incorporate it into the specular. So I'm going to use a mix RGB. And let me set the value. I'm going to use this as a mask, actually. So we can use that by mask, I also mean factor. So plug that into the factor of this mix node. And then whatever color I make color slot number 2, perfect. That's going to be the value of specularity. So we plug that into specular, see what that looks like. Let the shader compile, turn off my overlays. Why am I not seeing any reflectivity? Oh, wait, it is there. Ah, because the roughness is set to 0.4. We want that set really low. So I need to do the same thing. Oh, no, I can just use this by itself. No, I'll use it as a Shift-D to duplicate. I'm also going to use it as a factor. Yikes, can't even see it. Color into the factor of this bottom node. And the reason I'm using it as a factor is I can explicitly choose the speckle value, which is going to be the black and white. Let me show you what I mean. Right, so I set up the roughness to be 0.4 for the specks. So let me copy that value. Oh, let me just do it in color slot number 1, 0.4. And then for the ocean itself, I want it to be much lower, like 0.05. I think that's what we made the other ocean. Now when we plug this into the roughness, let it compile. There we go. You can see that it's reflecting. However, we don't have screen space reflections enabled, and that's why Melvin is not being reflected. So let me go ahead and enable ambient occlusion and also screen space reflections. There we go. We can see Melvin being reflected in that bit of surf. All right. But sand, when it's wet, it gets dark, right? So we need to incorporate this one more place. Shift, well, let's see. I'm going to use that color mix node again. We're going to use this one more time as a factor. I'm going to save my scene. Eevee is hiccuping on me a little bit. And then I want a darker color, but set as an overlay that will darken the existing color underneath it. But I don't. Yikes, that looks bad. Clamping. All right, forget that. Not black and not overlay. I'm going to use mix and just set it as a darker sand color. Let's not overcomplicate things, Kent. There we go. I think that should look pretty good. Oh, you can't even see it in the camera. All that work for nothing. All it means is I just need to broaden the effect. So let's see here. I need to be able to see the 3D and the rendered view. So I'm going to split my view and switch to rendered over here as well. Yeah, I just need to bring back, is it this? I've already forgotten. Yeah, it's this. So I need to move back. Is it this location? There we go. So the Y location. Okay, you can start to see it a little bit better. Maybe I need to rotate my camera up. Well, how does that look? Let's see what it looks like in the render. There we go. It's a little more visible. I guess it's never going to be completely obvious. But I could rotate the camera up, I suppose, if I want to see it a little more. I'm going to rotate it according to our 3D cursor, because that's still at the center of Melvin. So I'll be rotating around Melvin. There we go. Just rotating it up slightly. Now we see more of it. It completes the effect, makes it worth doing. All right, save the scene. How much time do we have left? About 40 minutes. Let me see if I've missed any other questions. No, good. Looks like an oil spill. The final effect shouldn't look like an oil spill. It should look like ocean surf, hopefully. But, right, speaking of surf, I need to add a little bit of white wavy surf, you know, that white like foam that appears when waves crash against the shore. I want to add that to our ocean shader in a similar manner to what we did here. Save my file. All right, the same sort of situation, though now I know that I can use the object texture coordinates, and the gradient will start from right here, and that will help me maybe like have a little bit more range to play with whenever it comes to the gradient. So let me see, how am I going to add this? Let me duplicate this gradient and the mapping node. Let me reset the mapping node. Start fresh with object coordinates into the gradient and see what that does for us. Okay, we need to rotate in Z. I think. Yes. We can see that the gradient now starts at the object origin, which is that little orange dot. I can scale then in one of the axes. Whoops. Yes, the Y axis. I should also then be able to move in the y-axis, not the y-axis. Is it the x-axis? Yes, the x-axis. There we go. All right, so this starts to identify the surf, the portion of surf. All right, and it is, you know, it's like isolating the gradient to only where I need it. Rather than using the generated coordinates, I only get that tiny bit to play with right here. So this way I have more control over the specific area of surf. Hope that makes sense. Let me look in the camera view real quick. Make sure that we're going to see enough of that surf. All right. And then I can control it with a converter color ramp, fine tune it. There we go. Nice. Okay, so the same sort of trick that we use to break up the edge, I'm going to use to add a wavy pattern. Although I kind of forgot how I did that, because I came up with a pretty cool effect. Let me just take a little reference break, go back and see how I did that in the previous version. Save the file, and I'm going to open R&D, Assemblies, Beach version 103. I cannot remember exactly how I set this up. Let these shaders compile. Yeah, so this is the effect that I want to add now. I'm going to select the ocean material and refresh my brain at how I did that. I remember I used the divide operation for some reason. It just happened to work. So I need that noise texture. It has its own color ramp. A divide is how it mixes in with the object texture coordinates. Okay, I think I've got an idea. Let's make it happen. All right, so I want to question, is that Eevee shader compile speed dependent on your computer specs? I'm not sure, honestly. Also, I know that if you open, in my experience, if you open a fresh Blender scene, like, well, I guess what I'm saying is Eevee seems to keep that data in memory. So if I compile this scene, it should compile much faster. Yeah, like immediately, because it like stored that data in memory, I guess. So sometimes it can compile really quick, but if I'm like turning my computer on for the first time, opening a Blender scene for the first time, it will take longer to compile. And I can only assume it does have to do with computer specs, surely. All right, so for the next half hour, I want to start importing some of those assets. That's what I want to do. The surf, that's right. I know that I'm going to be adding another texture, noise texture. And that is going to be mixed in with these, with the vector data, color mix RGB, as a divide function. I don't think I've ever used divide, honestly. But for whatever reason, it seemed to work. Famous last words. Maybe the scale is too big. Not big enough. Oh, it's probably too big. Why is that doing literally nothing? Object. Let's try something else. Multiply. Overlay. I'm getting absolutely no behavior. Oh, I can start to see it. It is happening. It must be... Yeah, so it is happening. Weird. Okay. divide does not seem to be the ace in the hole that I thought it would be. Oh, come on. Did I not understand what was going on there? Oh, we're getting something a little better. Okay, object coordinates seem to work better in this case. I am very confused why divide had this really interesting effect happen that doesn't seem to be happening here. You know, it's one of those happy accidents where you just start messing with settings and like, oh, wow, that worked awesome the first time. Thank you, Blender. All right, I need to, man, I'm so bummed that that didn't work out better than it should have. All right, well, let me try and figure this out. No, this is bothering me. It's not working the same. I'm missing something in my nodes. Sorry, this is boring, just me seeing, like, just going back to reference what's happening here. Beach version 03. I just remember I really like the effect and I want to get it back. What happened here? Yeah, like this looks so cool and stylized. Why? How did I get there? All right, so I'm just scaling it using generated coordinates. Very big value. Ah, okay, that's one thing I was missing is the color ramp, I crushed the values pretty strongly. And then divide. Divide straight up on the object coordinates. Okay, okay. Let's get this right. So I think part of the problem is I need to crush the values. The noise by itself is just a little too subtle. So if I add converter color ramp and crush them, is this the magic? Wait. It's literally not. Why? Oh, it maybe needs to be up to 1. This is driving me nuts. Why is it different? Is anyone seeing any glaring differences that I'm missing? It's like it's almost trying to. Very weird. Perhaps object scale is different. I mean, maybe, but it should be at 0, like at 1. Scale is 1 here. I'm not sure what it is in the other scene. Okay, I guess I'm gonna have to. What a bummer. Oh wait, this isn't even being plugged in yet. That was what I was missing. That is along in the right direction of what I wanted. So this color, it was apparently very, very important for this color ramp to be crushed. right? Like the contrast to be much higher. Wow, that was maybe the most boring stream 10 minutes of my career. This is more the effect that I'm after. Hooray. Because, yeah, it looks like an ocean. Like it looks like fun, stylized surf. Just need to adjust maybe the scale. 0.5. There we go. Yeah, that's pretty much what I want. Can we see that? Not really. So if I move backward in X, that will take the surf further out. That's the pattern that I want, but I want it to just stretch a little bit more. It must have to do with this. There we go. There we go. I think I should be able to see that in camera. All right, we've got some surf. That took way too long to do. Wow. And you can even animate it. Like that's a really cool effect. I knew the divide was important. That was a super important color ramp. Anyway, object coordinate in noise scale 200, divide in, oh man, how did you pick all that up? That's impressive with those values, Spiky. Are those from like what you saw in the shader? If so, that's an unbelievable memory. Okay, so we finally created the pattern. I just need to add it into the color now. So color, mix RGB. I'm going to add it into this color ramp with the base color, and then change the operation to add. That looks pretty good. Clamp it because I don't want it to take on any emissive values. Now, what I also saw in the previous version of the scene is that white, I don't want that to be pure white over here. It won't let me, okay, there we go. I want it to be a little off from white. So a little bit darker into that range. There we go. Yes, that looks pretty good. All right, we've got some surf in our little sliver of an island. This looks pretty good. All right, so for the last 25 minutes or so, let's start to import some things. Let's start to link in some of our assets, all right? Because we've just created the base, like foundation of our scene. Now we're ready to start decorating it with trees and bushes and things like that. So Control S, and then I'm gonna duplicate this into version 2. We shouldn't need 2 viewports anymore. File append, I'm gonna start, not append, file link, because for some reason linking is important and I just couldn't explain it as well as I should have. But I will come back to with why linking is super important. What am I looking for? Props, palm tree, and then palm trees collection. We'll do both of them, palm tree A and B. And yikes, I did not build those things to scale. I just completely slipped my mind. It should be okay. We'll just have to scale all of these down. I don't think that will be consequential. All right, so for moving these around and like sticking them to the surface of the beach, let's use face snapping. And okay, maybe I do need to see the rendered view. So let's make another window here, just further segmenting. our interface, and I will set this to 3D view, camera view, and rendered mode. We can turn off widgets and overlays. All right, so let's I want to use median point. I can just snap it to the surface so it stays on the beach. You'll notice that the tree pattern is swimming, I think, because it's a procedural texture, so it's kind of swimming as we rotate our tree around. Wonder if that's going to be a problem for us. But yeah, all I'm trying to do is kind of rotate this so that it hangs kind of around Melvin, just like our reference. You know, we're going to have 2 palm trees, one on each side, kind of framing the focus. Yeah. I don't want the scene to be completely symmetrical. You know, I want it to be sort of in the middle, like sort of symmetry, 1 palm tree on each side, but they're not exactly positioned the same. The same sort of foliage on either side of that's going to generate this path in the sand. But yeah, it's sort of like symmetry, but not, I guess. All right, that looks pretty good for the palm trees. And I really don't care like that the palm tree is just crashing through the beach. That is totally fine. It's not in camera and therefore not a big deal. But this part is fun, I must admit. I like decorating the scene with linked assets. Let's link in another one. Link the fern. Where did that go? Oh, I didn't do that properly. File, link, fern, collection. I didn't name the collection. Silly me. There it is. Our massive fern. Now we can just scale it down and position it. If I want to judge the scale, I'll put it next to Melvin. And, you know, that looks like a decent scale, at least to get started. And yeah, just continue set dressing, essentially. Keeping an eye on the framing. Want it to be appealing. I'll rotate my duplicates around so that the duplication is not so obvious. Very nice. I can increase the ambient occlusion value, I think. Currently, it's a little too subtle. So let's go to like 1 meter. Okay, now I'm starting to see ambient occlusion from the plants to the beach surface, which is nice. What does 0.5 look like? Yeah, I think that looks a little bit better. Well, I also like the darkening in the leaves. Somewhere between 0.5 and 1 meter. Wait, that's changing the factor. Yeah, so I think a distance of 1 meter is going to be preferable. All right, let's duplicate a couple of these to the other side. Scale them different sizes. Yeah, I really think this part's fun. If you follow along this, I think you'll experience the same thing. All right, so it looks very duplicated right now, but once we add the other, what were they, umbrella trees. Let me also see a couple questions from Omar, or just one question. You can use the numbers in the color ramp node to select the color flags and avoid cumbersome selection when they are too tight. you can use the numbers in the color ramp. What? I think what you mean is... Oh, that's what you mean. Yeah. Omar, I never knew that's what it was for. This little value is the number of the color ramp flag. That's super helpful. Thank you, Omar. I never knew that. All right, let me link in that umbrella tree. It fills in so much space and it looks really nice. Oh, I never saved this as a final version. Let me do that real quick. Umbrella tree version 2. Ah, yes. Let me... Umbrella tree A. I don't want this to be part of it. Let me just move this out of the collection. So what is this? Oh, okay. All right, a couple things I need to clean up. I was confused why there were 2 leaves. I don't need this one. I want to leave leaves there as a utility. Remember, I was thinking about doing a second version of this. That's right. That's right. But I need all of these to be in the center of the world. Why is it not moving? GX. Wow. Took several seconds of waiting for the translate tool to work. All right. Now I can save this as the real version, umbrella trees. All right, let's go back to the assembly file. And file link umbrella tree collection umbrella tree A. There we go. I'm going to keep these fairly small. I love how much room. It just fills up all that empty space and I think immediately feels believable. And even though we've got all those leaves involved, it's really not like slowing down the scene at all. Oh, looks like Aaron showed up. Hello, Aaron. Welcome, sir. Very cool. I think that looks good. Maybe one more kind of in right there. There we go. Yeah. Nice and populated, at least from the camera view. All right, let me duplicate over to the other side. Have you ever seen a smaller render window than what I'm using? Because that is pretty small. Anyway, we're going to be wrapping this up pretty soon. I'm just going to populate the sides. I wanted to end the stream with having our assets in here populated. Oh, I want to add a few rocks too. But yeah, we're getting close to being done for today. And I'm fine scaling these things down, you know, significantly. I think that looks pretty good. All right, I think I just want a couple rocks, and then we can call it a day on those extra assets. Link our rock collection rock. Now remember, we built this rock to look good from all angles. So even though it's one object, you really shouldn't be able to tell that it's going to be duplicated all over the place. All right, so we can set maybe a bigger one in the sand over here. Do we even see that in the camera? Not really. There we go. Maybe make it a bigger one. Flatten it down a touch. And then duplicate, scale down, rotate a completely different angle. Just make the tip of it, you know, stick out of the sand even. And just like that, like you'll never know. Let's make a couple small ones too. Oh, look at that. So it looks like my rock is hovering above the surface. That's a little bit ugly. I guess I can deal with it, but ideally I would have moved my rock exactly where it should have been. Because now my collection has this offset from where the pivot is. That's just a little annoying. Yeah, I think that looks cool. Maybe put a couple on the other side, although there's one thing that I did want to show you. So all of our rocks currently are exactly the same color, but we can change that up, right? We could jump over to our rock file. I'm going to duplicate several of these just for the sake of demonstration. All right, they're all sharing the same material, but we can use the, is it input geometry? Object info. All right, we can use object info. And if we scroll down until we see the random output, this is a different random value per object. So I can use that to overlay color mix RGB, overlay on top of our, well, there's a couple ways to implement this. I'm going to try first with an overlay. Yeah, so now when we plug that up, our rocks are going to be slightly different hues, or slightly different values. If I increase the amount of the overlay, now you can see this one is obviously a much brighter color. And as I duplicate, it should be a slightly different color each time, a slightly different value each time. Obviously, this one's the most dark. There's a very dark one. All right, so let's see if that is enough. If I just delete these, Control S to save it, go back to the tropical beach assembly, and all our rocks should be slightly different in color. Yeah, so we have a dark one. In fact, maybe a little bit too different in color. Yeah, that's a little too strong. Also, the reflection, maybe I can take down the reflection. Now that we're seeing it in context, yeah, maybe the overlay should be set to like 0.5. So I'll go back there. 0.5. Excellent. Just a little touch to further suggest these are not duplicates. Anyway, oh yeah, I did want to use the last bit of time today to talk, or really pitch you guys on this Sheepit thing. All right, so that is going to wrap up today's project, today's episode about the tropical environment. Next week, I'm going to add this to the calendar, and we will finish up this project, at least the still frame, by adding the islands in the background and then doing final rendering and compositing. But yeah, I think this was a decent step forward in going from individual assets to now we have like an environment started. And I think it's turning out okay. All right, so with that said, if you're still here, hear my pitch about Sheepit. You guys might know that, let me switch to my browser, that on CG Cookie in the community forum, our good friend Omar Dominic is rendering his demo reel scenes, and he's been using this thread to kind of organize the render process. He needed some help, and so he reached out to the community, and we've been helping him render, and it's gone really well. We've been using Google Drive rather, and manually syncing between multiple people. Well, in trying to think this through, how can we do this a little bit better, I stumbled upon this website. I don't know why I have a picture of an ant. When was I? I'm not doing an ant project. That's weird. Sheepit is what it's called. Sheepitrenderfarm.com. All right, so this website is a free, like kind of open source spirited render farm. There's no money involved. You sign up. You render none of them. There's no money, but it does have this point system that I think is really brilliant. Anyway, if we all sign up for this, whoever has been helping Omar render his demo reel, I think it's going to help us a lot to use this instead of the manual Google Drive method. So, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to say. I'm in like a testing phase right now. So if we go down to the last page in this forum thread, help render Omar's demo reel. At the very end, we've been talking about it, and I want you to create, if you're willing, to create an account at Sheepit and then ask to join the CG Cookie team. All right. So if we create a team, then whenever we submit a project, we can all, as a group, like gang up on that project specifically. Sheepit will prioritize that for our team rather than, let random projects come in. And so I want to test if this is viable for big picture, like a community within CG Cookie that has like a render group, like a render team for anyone who needs to render a project. Me, you, anyone in the team can utilize Sheepit, and that's kind of what I'm after. I think that would be pretty cool if we had that as a resource. So I'm going to make a post on this thread inviting you to join. All right, I'm going to tell you how should I do this. There's a link to our team. I'll provide a link, and if you want to go to this thread, click the link, sign up, and download the little applet. It's pretty self-explanatory on the site how to get up and running with Sheepit, and then join our team. Once we have a few people, then we can try rendering Omar's scenes this way rather than through Google Drive. This means no syncing through Google Drive. It won't use your hard drive space the way Google Drive does, and it's very automated. You just turn on Sheepit, and it will grab the project, the correct version of Blender, and do all that automatically. But just to get started, I really want to make a bigger in-depth video about Sheepit because I think it's a far underrated, underutilized thing from what I've seen. But for now, if we can join and get part of, build up this CG Cookie team, we can test how viable it is. Let me see if I've missed any questions about this. Yeah, so right now I'm going to get off the stream and, well, I guess I could, while I'm on the stream, go ahead and make a post. I know that I said, let me go find the link to the team. I sent it to Omar earlier today. Sheepit. Where is the team? Here it is. The team I just created. Copy the link. All right. Reply to this topic. All right. So if you want to join, let's see. How would I type this out? All right. So we're going to go to sheepit.com. Well, I'm gonna have to edit this post. I'm gonna have to think through it. I might not do it on the fly, but yeah. So there's gonna be a post here. I'm not gonna waste your time. I'm gonna make a post right after this stream. Join the Sheepit CGC Sheepit render team. You follow the link, sign up, and get involved. All right. So that's the first step. If you're willing to help, that would be great. Again, the big picture here is if this works for Omar, like the team could continue to grow, and anyone within CG Cookie would have a very legitimate resource for rendering within the community. So anyway, it could be a pretty cool thing, I think. I'm going to let you go and stop rambling about this, but yeah, I'll see you next week for finishing up this project. Thank you for sticking around, and have a great rest of your Tuesday. Goodbye.